Egbert, it's good to be with you here in this meeting. So, we want to talk about the DIN SPEC 15587, about cinematographic works. You and I, we both were partner in that standardization action. And so let us discuss the DIN SPEC and the relevance to our clients. So first, can you give the audience a brief insight on the genesis behind the DIN SPEC standard?
I mean, the beginning was the state funding of digitization in Germany. It was in 2013. And from this moment, there was a great need for technical orientation, technical recommendations for, let's say, sustainable digitization in Germany. And this was the beginning. The DIN, this is a German standard institution, gained relevant partners from the industry, from research, from archiving, bring them together to working on a standard for sustainable digitization of the German film heritage. This was a beginning. A few names: Fraunhofer Institute, your company Cube-Tec, a service provider like ARI, or also as device manufacturer, University Wiesbaden, Further Archives Germany as an archive, or Northern Archive, the German Film Museum in Frankfurt. These were the partners and start on this work. And it was a long way up to, springtime 2019. We were ready. It was a very complicated way because on the end we had to document 50 pages, and it was then published in springtime 2019.
Oh, yeah, and I remember also the public podcaster from Germany was within the group and their input.
Yes, Omnimago, for an example, again as a service provider, but yes, many other institutions in this group in the standardization.
And a lot of meetings, I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I think for the audience it's more important to see what is the relevance for whom is the DIN SPEC really relevant. Can you give us some insight in that?
Yes, the idea was to work on a document to connect, let's say, at first both sides, the customer or clients on one side, these are right owners of film productions or the archives, and on the other side, let's say the contractors means service provider laboratories. But there was, let's say, a third side, these were the device manufacturers, means producer of scanning machines and of, by the way, equipment to examine the condition of film material in preparation of a digitization. And last but not least, also the wish was to bring in the boat a little bit also the funding institutions which fund the digitization in Germany.
So I think now it's more important to understand what is really covered by the norm. So I think that maybe you can show us more what is in 50 pages, you say. So
yeah,
have you something to highlight what is covered with the DIN SPEC?
I'm well prepared and tried to put it here on the screen. So what we have, this is the best way to talk about the content is to look at the table of contents. At first, a fast scroll, you see there are a lot of topics. And to go through in a fast way, please stop me if it's too fast. It starts, as every standard, with normative references, terms and definitions. This is the international way to start with a recommendation or a standard. And then you can see we start with all stages before the digitization starts. This means we start with questions like, or topics like, air condition, storage during work on the material, transport, intermediate storage, and then a topic handling, health hazards, danger to the film material, danger to the film technology, to the equipment. This means point 4 here we have all do's and maybe don'ts before we start with the digitization process. And then topic 5 is the description of the digitization workflow. Also questions like preservation of authenticity, search for existing material, diagnosis of film material. This means not only technical questions, also questions more from the filmographic side of the digitization process. And then we have a very important point here, technical diagnosis, preparation of technical workflow of the film material, repair, packaging, conditioning, cleaning. This means these are directly working stages direct before we start with the digitization process. Is this 0.55. And here you can see that we differ it in the raw scan, and later on we have stages after the digitization itself, and this means all these processing steps after digitization. Yes, I mean, this was a very fast way through the table of contents. Maybe you have questions.
Yeah, I know, it's very impressive. And know that on the formats we decided to be not normative and to be open, because the European action at CEN is taking over and is doing that now on the European level. But I think it's important for the client outside of Germany to see which relevance that norm had. We already see that there's an English translation. We see that here already. So you can read it, but what do you think is the relevance for users which are not located in Germany?
Yes, I mean, standardization, or at first digitization, with a history of restoration and conservation, is an international business. This means in the past there are a lot of cooperation between the archives, but also between the service provider. And so in respect with this standard, I mean, or it's a recommendation, met also international interest. And this was the reason then later on, as means after 2019, to do a translation in English and to publish it later on in English. And by the way, we both wrote an article in the Journal of Film Preservation. It's a journal of the FIAF, the Federation of International Film Archives. And this also shows there was really an international interest in this standard. And this, by the way, this publication in this journal, yes, we wrote a little bit about the idea behind this standard and the content of this standard.
Okay, I can put a link on it. And so
yeah, maybe this will be useful.
What is the step when I want to get that? You know, a lot of recommendations are nowadays available for free, and the traditional way of standardization bodies is to go via a paywall. I think we all know that, and we have no chance to change that. We don't get money for doing standardization work, but it's the way the standards needs to be bought. So what is the way here when I want to get that DIN SPEC? What is my step to do?
Yes, again, let's have a look here on the screen. The easiest way, go on the website of the Beuth Verlag. Beuth works in the as a publisher of DIN, and the easiest way, go on the website www.beuth.de. Beuth, as you can see, BEUTH, and here you can click and can decide you need it in German or in English version, and you can buy it as a file or in a print version. The price for standards, we know it's not really cheap, but for a document like that, I mean, it's a good price.
Yep, that is discussed controversially. But I think important is that if you have only one standard that you have to buy, it may be easy. But if you look to all the standards we referenced in the DIN spec, I think it's easy for me to understand that that in smaller archive, say, I can't buy all the, how many standards do we have referenced? 50, 100, I don't know, but you can't buy them all. It's really too much for most of the archives if they are in a similar area of price and you don't have it already with your organization. But for that, you had a great idea, and you have to tell us what was a great idea to help the community to get to that referenced standards.
Yes, I mean, it starts with the problem that normally in a standard you have only reference to standards which are active, and that we talk about the digitization of heritage from more than 100 years, and so the idea was to put the most interesting standards of analog film material and recording in a book, in a typical handbook, we call it in Germany. And just a moment to show it. And yes, the rights on all these analog standards are with Boyd, the publisher Boyd. And so in cooperation with Boyd, I put, nearly 100 standards or recommendations in one book with some comments. And there is only a German version, but it's relatively easy to understand what is in this book, because, you know, analog standards mostly have graphs and many tables, and so it's very easy to read as a foreigner in this German book. And second point, there are tables and references between DIN and ISO, and ISO and DIN means in both directions, and so maybe it's also for our foreigner for interest to have a look.
Sorry.
Yeah, and as I said, you can order it also on this website, the website of Boyd publisher. I wrote some articles about special aspects, these aspects where things change over the decades between 1922, by the way, this was the beginning of German standardization. And I wrote about some aspects and changes over the time. For example, the changes of these aspects of synchronization between, or the distance between sound and picture, it changed over the years or over the decades better. And there are some informations about color in soundtracks and what it means for scanning soundtracks.
So cyan and magenta and silver and all that.
Yes, all these. Yes, but not only the switch between red reader and so-called white light reader, also in the older, let's say older history. Let's say in the 15th, it was a question which kind of light source or which kind of sensor. There was different sensor already in that time to use, and there are some information about this history, and maybe important for digitizing today and scanning today soundtracks.
Yeah, I remember we had long discussions and digged very deeply in the technology.
Yeah, for specialists and for if we talk about sustainable digitization, these are really important questions, how to do it on the right way.
Yep, I think that was a good conclusion, to do it in the right way. I think that's it.
I mean, I just remember your question was, will there be an English version? As my idea is to translate these articles about these special questions and developings in the field of standardization, special topics, and maybe there will be a publishing of these then translated articles. It's in my mind in the moment.
Okay, let's see what the future will bring. I think there are enough interesting questions in the history of cinema which need to be rediscovered again. Yeah. Okay, Egbert. So thanks a lot. Do you want to say a last word to our audience?
Thank you for your invitations. For me, the standard is really important, and let's hope that also in the future the institutions which are responsible for funding have a little bit to look more on these standards than it was in the past.
Okay, let's give a word to the funding communities. I think that's really important. All begins with having the money to do the work. We can't change that.
Yeah.
Okay, Egbert, thanks so much. It was fun to talk with you again.
Thank you, too, with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.